as you're coming in, I want to welcome you to the MSU Extension's Field Crops Virtual Breakfast. I'm Sarah Franzak. I'm an environmental management educator based out of Hillsdale County, and I'm your host for today, along with Eric Anderson. And this morning, we're going to be talking about some hot topics that have come up during the growing season. First up is, let's see, Marty and Dennis, you want to talk about your hot topic?
Sure. I've written a couple of articles about it, but virus management in wheat. So for some of the viral diseases that we see in wheat that can be pretty damaging, we want to start thinking about management right now. So one of them in particular is wheat streak mosaic virus, and that is transmitted by a mite. And the problem there is that any volunteer wheat acts as a green bridge between this year's crop and next year's crop. So essentially, we want to make sure that we kill off any volunteer wheat 2 weeks before we plant the next crop to try and eliminate that green bridge. Unfortunately, that wheat leaf curl mite can survive on corn, but the biggest sort of factor here, biggest risk factor, is that volunteer wheat that we have out in our fields, or some grass weeds as well. So just cleaning off, removing that volunteer weed is really critical to the management of that. There's been sort of samples submitted throughout the season to the MSU Plant Diagnostic Clinic to just sort of get a sort of sense of where things are at, but we'll be doing a far more systematic survey next season, just try and bring some awareness to this and just check on the various types of viruses that are out there. I know, like personally, we've been burnt by this, where we did have volunteer wheat and we didn't think to get it managed prior to sowing our next crop, and we had very uneven field, very reduced yields. So it's a very, very real thing, and I just want to make sure people are a little bit more aware of that. There's a lot of different factors that will influence it too. So if we have sort of a mild fall and winter, that'll allow the mites to be more active and to spread that virus around more. Proximity to last year's wheat crop as well. So I just want you all to be aware of that. Just get out and manage your volunteer wheat.
All right.
Help. Yeah.
We have a couple questions here. Does rye also spread the mites?
Yes, it does. So it's a lower risk factor than volunteer wheat. But yes, there's a huge number of grass hosts. So yes, it can.
Okay. All right. And can wheat mosaic virus be transmitted between fields if my neighbor doesn't control his volunteer wheat?
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll also come down to a proximity, how close we are together. So when we were affected, it was right across the laneway, and we very often see a pattern with this particular disease as well, as those mites are carried on the wind from field to field. We'll typically have an edge effect like we do with quite a few viral diseases. Particularly if they're transmitted by insects, we tend to see that. So,
all right. From Leon, he says the weather forecast in our area, the Saginaw Valley, shows no rain for a week, which sounds good for forage harvest, but the forecast humidities are above 50% and even 60%. Is there any chance the humidities will be lower?
Yeah, interesting question. And this one, I would say initially here, with this cooler, we get this cool, dry Canadian air mass in here. There will be, well, we have water today, and there will be some water left from the precipitation after today, but it is a relatively dry air mass, and so we should get drying off of the foliage relatively rapidly tomorrow and on Saturday and then into Sunday. But I mentioned higher dew points and more humidity by early next week, so it's going to warm up a lot. But there'll also be an increase in dew point. But I'm going to say here that I think gradually we will have certainly at least moderate dewfall on these evenings. But I think it's because of the temperature and the high sun we probably will have, well, the humidities won't be too bad, and there will be drying off. And so again, for forage harvest, I'm thinking this is looking like a pretty favorable window of opportunity coming up.
All right. Another forage related question is, do you think we'll have enough time to dry out and still have time for our summer alfalfa seeding? I don't know if Kim is on.
I'm here, but
All
I'm
right.
having some trouble with, can you hear me?
Yes, Kim.
Okay. I don't know. It won't let me show my camera for some reason. It depends on how much rain you got, obviously wherever you are at. But as if you may remember the talk that I gave for virtual breakfast last year, we were able to push back our late summer alfalfa planting a little bit over our traditional deadline of mid-August, because our climate is changing. So we're pretty comfortable right now with at least in the lower half of the state that you could go up to Labor Day with that last alfalfa planting and still have a good chance of success. So you have a little bit more time. And at least here where I'm at, we were actually thinking that we were going to be so wet after this last rainfall that we were not going to be able to get onto our fields, but things are actually better than we thought they were. So get out there and check your ground and make sure that whether, and find out whether you can get out there or not, but there's still time.
All right, great.
So
one more question for you, Jeff, and then we're going to head back to Marty. So Jeff, does U2U take into account any stunting or delays in development due to drought, or is it only based on growing degree dates?
Yes, that's a good point. It does not. It's based purely on when you tell it, or when you start. You can start the simulation anytime you want, but it's based purely on degree days. And so some of this synchrony between degree day accumulation at the beginning of the season and the end is not accounted for. I don't know if Manny Singh is on this morning. He's looked at this in more detail, and and Bob Nielsen at Purdue has looked at this over the years. It's something that is real, but U2U does not have that type of sophistication. It's just a straight degree day. But it's still going to be in the ballpark, I think.
Well, here's Manny.
Yeah. So I think there were some questions about where the phenology is, right, in terms of if we are going to make it or not. And as Jeff said, he showed a pretty good, detailed overview of this tool, but it's basically just based on the heat accumulation, right? So it does not account for any biotic stresses, right? So, or abiotics. So drought is an example this year. Because of that, I think we had some delay in the development, right? So U2U is not going to account for that, I believe. And then what also happens is, again, with this delayed establishment emergence, where we have concerns about reaching maturity, and Jeff showed that simulation of using June 15th, if it took 15, 20 days from even a May planting to come up, right? So we still have this phenomena we call growing degree decompression. So a corn planted late in the growing season actually goes through the development relatively quicker. So it won't take as many heat units as if it was planted on time, right? So U2U does not account for that. And the way to do that is you simply go up where Jeff was showing you the maturity, where you can enter that, and you change your growing degree days. So instead of I think Jeff had for his 99 hybrid, he had around 2,400 growing degree days. You change that to, generally our number is 4 to 5 growing degree days per day delay of planting. So if we are dealing with end of June, you cut it down by 100 or so. And now it'll give you a more realistic simulation of when our crops are able to mature. So something to again keep in mind, and you can play around with that tool, right? If you have any concerns, feel free to email or call me or Jeff, and we can help you more with that.
Okay.
And one last thing with it, and in this case, and what Manny's meant, the compression, that is in our favor this year to speed things up. So it would be, again, making things happen more rapidly than they might otherwise.
So compression is to our benefit. That comes with the delayed planting, but the drought we had earlier in the season, that can be a detriment, right? Because that was delaying the development. How much we really don't know, but that can be a potential negative.
All right, thank you. We're gonna bring Marty back up here. We've got a few questions in the chat for you. So is there a chemical we can apply in the fall to help control the virus?
Yeah, so unfortunately not. We really don't have sprays for virus control. So it just comes back to trying to manage that volunteer wheat is one of the important things that we can do to help reduce virus transmission from that last or this year's crop into the planting of next year's crop.
Okay. Tom says he worked up the wheat stubble and planted oats, radish, cover crops. Will there be any disease issues he should be concerned about?
On the viral front, again, I mean, it depends what he's planting back into that, I guess. But with respect to viruses, again, if he's killed that wheat, that should help reduce that risk.
All right. Marty, we got another question for you. Is there a date when we can stop tar spot concerns?
Sure. So basically, it comes down to when disease is there and when it really blows up. So here is the map of tar spot. So we track the tar spot. If you see it, send me a good quality photo and let me know which county, and I can get that mapped out for you. So essentially, we're about a month behind where we were in 2021 when we had that really bad tar spot outbreak. Essentially, I think for the most part, up to about the R3, that milk stage is when we can, probably stop worrying as much about it. However, there's been situations, where a very early R5 dent application has protected 20 bushels. But that's the rare exception, and we've tried to repeat that sort of work and just haven't been able to do it. So I would say somewhere between, if you're going to make a fungicide application, most of the time between R1 and R3 is going to be optimal for most years, with those rare exceptions in there. So when we did have build-up of disease and saw that 20 bushel protection with that, beginning a dent application, we were really in a situation where disease was starting to absolutely explode in that particular field. So I think the really important thing is, if you're trying to do this blind, between R1 and R3 is probably good enough, right? But if you want to do a better job, you really need to be out in your fields and be scouting to be aware of the disease situation. And certainly if it does look like it's going to, if it's really starting to ramp up, then, maybe there could be some value to a later application, but it's the exception. So I think for the most part, we're probably getting beyond it. But I would just keep really watching, seeing what's happening. So.
Right, thanks. And John asks, is there anything that can be done, or is there anything that can be used on water hemp in soybeans this late in the season? Is there a specialist on that can answer a water hemp question?
I'm sorry, Sarah, what was that
It's okay.
question?
Is there anything that can be used on water hemp in soybeans this late in the season?
Technically, everything would be off-label. We're far enough along in the season where things like Liberty and Enlist and some of those are past the stage of being able to spray.
Okay, thank you. Leon had a forage question. We have an old alfalfa hay field that we are planning to plow up and replant after autotoxicity is gone. Is there a good grass we could sow this late summer and get some forage next summer, like before the alfalfa autotoxicity is gone?
Yes. Well, no other plants are affected by the autotoxicity at all. So anything other than alfalfa can be planted there. So in the same fall planting window that we have for alfalfa, you can plant any of our standard forage grasses like that are perennials like orchard or orchard grass or Timothy, or if you have a market or use that will be able to use tall fescue, you can use that. And they can actually be planted a little bit later than alfalfa even. They don't need quite as much time before the first freeze to set their crown. So maybe you get up to in the lower part of the state up to mid-September for planting a perennial grass. In the northern part of the state, you're probably going to cut that off at Labor Day. Another option, if you want just a forage grass for a short period of time, is Italian ryegrass. As long as you pick one that has overwintering tolerance for Michigan, which you can find that out from the seed company. And those don't last more than about 1 year, but that's all you need really to get rid of the alfalfa autotoxicity.
Thanks, Kim. Christy, Brandon had a follow-up question about that water hemp. So what about doing a pre-harvest burn down on the water hemp?
As far as a pre-harvest, probably what you're going to have the seed there anyway, but yes, you could do something like a gramoxone application, also sharpen. Those two would probably help dry it down prior to harvest. So those would work, but it's probably not going to affect your the seed production on the water hemp seeds probably already going to be produced.
All right, great. We don't have any questions in the chat. So are there any specialists who have a hot topic they want to bring up?
Sarah, this is Christy. Just a reminder that next Wednesday is the Saginaw Valley Research and Extension Field Day up there near Richville, just north of Frankenmuth. So mostly going to be focusing on sugar beet and dry bean issues from the season and some of the research that's been done out there. So there is some information on the MSUE News about how to register for that. And again, that's next Wednesday morning.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
I can go again if you like. So yeah, so white mold is really starting to pop now in terms of visual symptoms, but we're getting beyond that, that primary flowering window. If we're going to manage white mold, we should have done it a few weeks ago, between the beginning of flowering through to just initiation of pod development. So I guess the message here is probably save your money on those revenge sprays. It might feel good, but you're probably going to be wasting a bunch of money and not really getting any disease control. Once you see it, you're not going to control those particular infections. So,
all right. We have a question. Instead of plowing an old alfalfa field, could it be sprayed with herbicide and drill into the grass seed? And drill in the grass seed. Kim?
Sorry,
It's okay.
I'm slow with my buttons today. Yes, you can do that. Absolutely. If you have access to a no-till seeder, you can control that existing sod with glyphosate and drill directly into it. We do recommend, if you do that, in order to get good seed placement for a small seeded forage crop such as alfalfa, it is helpful if you killed the old sod at least 2 weeks or more before you go in to seed the new crop. It doesn't work very well to plant green into that sort of material because one, you're going to have trouble getting good seed placement with that tiny seed, and secondly, you're still going to have your original sod isn't going to have died yet. And when your new seeds come up, they're going to have trouble competing with that. So we're getting, if you wanted to do that for this fall, we're getting a little tight on the window. You'd need to get that old sod killed right away to still have time to wait 2 weeks and then put your seeding in. So if you're up and ready to go, it can work. In fact, we're planning to do some of that on our farm, but we already killed the old sod. We did that about 3 weeks ago. So.
All right. Thanks, Kim. Let's see. Leanne asked, I see evidence that I lost much less nitrogen this season than in previous years. Could that be due to the dry weather in June? I guess we'll get back to you on that. I'm not sure if anyone here is answering questions for nutrient management.
Sarah,
Yeah.
when we monitored across the state in different places, most of June, we didn't have any water passing through the profile. If you had enough water to keep the plant growing, we were doing real well. So we didn't, and normally we would have a couple events in June where the profile would fill and you'd have an opportunity to push water with nitrogen down. So it's very plausible that we kept nitrogen this year. Don't know that we utilized it as well as we could, but otherwise. If I could also quickly say, there's 3 positions open at MSU that are important to me. 2 are irrigation positions, irrigation efficiency positions, one with overhead field crops and a little bit of a livestock spin to it, and one in drip irrigation. And then in Southwest Michigan, we have a field crops position open. The dates are all open right now. They start closing early next week. If anybody knows anybody that's qualified for those that would like to have one of those great extension jobs, have them give us look it up online.
Mm-hmm. Look it up online, or if you need to contact a local MSU office, I'm sure they can help you find it. Thanks, Lyndon. That was a great plug for those things. We've got a question about SDS also beginning to flare up. What are the best practices for managing this disease moving forward?
Yeah. So SDS, like most diseases, variety selection really should be one of your first things to be thinking about. It was pretty obvious walking around some of the various research plots looking at variety differences within a field. So we really should try and think about variety selection. If you're seeing SDS in a field too, make a note of where you're seeing it, which field, so you have a record of where it is. I think one thing we're getting caught out on too is that we are planting resistant varieties, not seeing SDS, not having those favorable weather environments, and then forgetting about it, and then coming back and planting a variety without having sort of kept that in mind, accidentally planting a very susceptible variety, and that just gets absolutely smoked. This is a recurring pattern that seems to be happening. So if you know where you have heavy soybean sudden death syndrome pressure, variety selection, and then seed treatment. Crop rotation to corn doesn't really help. Of course, soybean on soybean is going to lead to other issues. We've seen some indication of diversified rotations such as alfalfa, red clover, potentially helping to reduce the amount of SDS in the field. And also manage your soybean cyst nematode, because that can help make the plants a little bit more susceptible to soybean sudden death syndrome.
And increase your soil health. So you've got lots of benefits there for having diverse rotations. So let's see, Kim, you got another question. How much grass seed, Timothy or orchard grass per acre should we plant for establishing a good forage for next year?
Well, I just added that to the chat, but for everyone listening and not reading, our recommended rate for a monoculture stand of Timothy is 6 to 8 pounds per acre. And for orchard grass, that is 10 to 12 pounds. And we have a really nice publication and extension that lists all those things. And I'm going to find it and put it in the chat here as soon as I'm done talking. And I'm just going to follow up to, we had a question come in that was a follow up to the previous question I had, that the stand that's being killed, that they want to drill no-till grass seed into, if that's alfalfa, do the same recommendations apply? And the answer to that is yes. You just need to make sure that you don't have so much, alfalfa doesn't leave as much sod for the for seedlings to directly compete with, but it will grow back if you don't have it killed already. So you do need to, we still use the 2 week before timeline for when to kill it compared to when to plant.
Thanks, Kim. All right, I think we're about ready to go. So we want to thank you for attending virtual breakfast with us today. Kim just put that link into the chat, so I'll if that's something that interests you, go ahead and click on that before we close this out. And if you want to find a recording of this, you can find it on our website. And you could also find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So we want to thank you for your time, and we'll see you next week.